looking at the structure question, which is question 3 on the language GCSE paper. We're going to take everything that we're talking about from the Edusites English document, the Brothers Moderation booklet, which can be found here on the Edusites website. It starts off with suggestions of how to use this document in class and in your department time. And then here we've got all of the question 3 responses. So it's got one for each band and then explanations as to why they would get those bands. So I've copied and pasted all of these just like this and put them into a PowerPoint, which I'll go through with you now. So AQA GCSE English Language Paper 1 Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing. The story is called Brothers. It's an entire short story in itself, and it's about two brothers, Kieran and Niall, who go fishing with disastrous consequences. This is the short story, so the students begin by reading the story, and then question 1, the 4 statements, question 2, language analysis, and then question 3, which is the one we're going to look at right now, and that's the structure question. So the question says you now need to think about the whole of the source. The text is, and then it will either be an entire short story, an opening, an ending, a middle part. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, any other structural features that interest you. So, the most important thing is that students understand the difference between what is language, what is structure, and that you yourself, as somebody who is marking the paper, understands the difference between the two. So all of these things in red can count as structure points, and these are ones that the students, you're looking for them to write about and looking for their comments on these things when you're marking their responses. There's plenty to talk about in terms of structure for this short story. All of these points would be valid things to bring up for analysis. Use of third person limited, 2 opposing characters, there's a flashback in there, there's a bit of foreshadowing when the fish is killed initially and then Kieran dies later on, and a pathetic fallacy, so you've got storm clouds brewing. So these are 2 responses. The first response: the story is told by a narrator and we can hear inside Niall's head and know what he is thinking. This is good because the writer makes you want to read on. Niall is the younger brother, Kieran is the older brother. This is like a fairy story, like Hansel and Gretel. Just like a fairy story, it does have a happy ending, with the hero beating the villain. But in this story, the villain is the brother and the hero isn't strong. This is like David and Goliath. This is karma. We are pleased Kieran dies and would be cheering, and it paints a picture in your head of someone suffering. The word gobshite makes you think Kieran isn't nice. So that's the first response. The second response: the writer uses pathetic fallacy when it begins to rain, and then Kieran falls into the water and Niall leaves him to drown. The writer does this to reflect the sad mood at this point. We feel sad because you might have secretly wanted them to make up, but instead things are worse than ever. So in terms of what marks we would give these, first thing to consider is their use of subject terminology. Just like the language question, you get marked on 3 things: how you write about the effect, use of textual detail, use of subject terminology. In both, we have subject terminology, the narrator, and pathetic fallacy. Narrator is a little bit more simplistic, pathetic fallacy is correct, and the moment they describe as their textual detail is also correct, so that's better than just narrator. looking at more detail, the comments that they actually make in the first answer, this is good because the writer makes you want to read on. A very common response, students tend to write this when they're feeling a bit panicky and they don't know what else to say. The middle section in light blue is just garbled rubbish, really. It's nothing like Hansel and Gretel, aside from the fact that there's siblings involved, and it's nothing like David and Goliath because there's actually no fight between them. Kieran just falls over the side and Niall rows away. It's a real stretch to compare it to David and Goliath. Talking about things like it being karma, this comes up a lot with students when they're waffling and they're not sure what to write. They always seem to write about karma and the idea of karma without really understanding what karma is. And this response is typical in that sense, that they haven't really understood the story and have waffled instead, or not understood what the question was really asking them. The last comment that I've highlighted in the yellow, the word gobshite makes you think Kieran isn't nice. Well, that's definitely language analysis. So they're getting marks for narrator. We'll give a mark for this is good because the writer wants you to read on in so much that we can acknowledge they've tried to say something. In the second response, it might be shorter, but it's a lot better. So the writer uses pathetic fallacy. When it begins to rain and then Kieran falls into the water and Niall leaves him to drown. Well, that's a specific moment in the text, and yes, that is pathetic fallacy. The writer does this to reflect the sad mood at this point, and we feel sad because we might have secretly wanted them to make up. But they're talking about the effect of that structure, so they're on the right lines there. So for the first one, we'd give it 1, and for the second one, we would give it 3. Maybe a push, we might give that first one 2, but really they don't say anything much more than that. And the 3 is for the attempt. That's definitely a level 2, band 2 in the old money, but a level 2 response. To look at better examples than level 3 and level 4, we've got these 2 responses. So the writer uses circular narrative by beginning and ending the story with descriptions of whether, at the start of the story, Niall and Kieran rowing to the centre of the loch in a calm, beautiful day with brilliant blue sky, and ends with Niall rowing back during a downpour. So here this student has used quotations for their textual detail really skillfully. They're pinpointing exactly the moments they want to talk about in the text, and they talk about the use of pathetic fallacy heightens the tension between the 2 brothers, indicates something bad will happen between the brothers. So there you can see that they're using the explanation. They're in that band, the level 3, where they're explaining the effect of the structure. It's not quite analysis. The analysis is more this kind of comment. The use of pathetic fallacy heightens the tension between the 2 brothers, indicates to the reader that something bad will happen between the brothers. The change in weather matches the increasing anger building up in the character of Niall, targeted at his brother Kieran. In this way, the storm is a metaphorical storm of anger in Niall. Now that is analysis. So the difference between explanation and analysis, just explaining what it does, why the writer's done it, and actually analysing, thinking about, well, what does that symbolise? Why might they have done that? What does this tell us about their motivations? So using everything from the Edusites website, I then copied and pasted different bits of the answers, just picking on one paragraph, and put it into a document like this, and then could look at them side by side. And this is very useful to use with students when making them focus on what is the difference between a level 3 and a level 4 answer, or a level 2 and level 3, whichever place you're focusing on. And then looking at these marks, we can see that the one that's much more detailed, why that would get an analysis marks because of the level of detail, talking about the motivations and the reasons why the writer has used that device. And that's our explanation of the structure question.